Hey, what's going on, everybody? So, this is our Poetic Elements study for this unit. So, for this unit, we're going to be looking at alliteration, consonants, and assonance. All right, so let's start with some basic definitions and some examples. So first, we're going to start with alliteration. As you can see here, alliteration is the repetition of the same consonant sounds, usually at the beginning of the words. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be. So for example, should the glee glaze? That would be an example of alliteration. In deaf's stiff stare. So those are two examples of alliteration. The beginning sounds that are consonant sounds, the beginning of words, but it has to be a pattern of those words. So usually two or more with the same repetition of consonant sounds is an example of alliteration. All right, so let's look at this example. Sweetness always. Verses of pastry which melt into milk and sugar in the mouth. So as you can see in this example, you have melt, milk, and mouth, which are all examples of alliteration, the repetition of the consonant sound. Assonance, the repetition of similar vowel sounds within syllables. So this is a little bit different than alliteration. This is similar vowel sounds within the syllable. So for example, you have, and make sure you're taking notes on some of these examples. That's what I'm going to look for in your notes, is some examples for alliteration, assonance, and consonants. So for example, it says, beware of the excessive assonance. Well, why did I just say that? Scratch that. It just says, beware of excessive assonance. Any assonance that draws attention to itself is excessive. So what they're doing here is giving an example of assonance. So here you have the color-coded letters that have the repeating similar vowel sounds. So here where it says attention to itself is excessive. So those would be examples of assonance. All right. So let's look at a couple more. Find the assonance in this quote. And let's go back for a second so I can further explain this. So this is divided here because they're trying to point out how excessive and self, these two have the repetition of the same vowel sound. You hear it, excessive and self. Excessive and self. So the key that I want to point out here is how it is the sound of the vowel. It is not looking for similar letters, but is how the letters sound. So keep that in mind. Assonance deals with the sound, not the letters. All right. So same thing here. Any assonance. So any assonance. So see how these have the same sound. Attention. Any. Okay. So all of these would be examples of assonance. All right. So let's look at an example. This is a quote from The Flea. Oh, stay 3 lives in one. Flee spare. Where we almost nay more than married are. Very weird quote. But let's look at the example. 3, flee. So you have the same sound here in we. And one thing we want to point out, no matter where the similar sounds are found, as long as they are repetition of the same sound, they count. So although they're spread out in 2 lines, you still have the same sound. All right, so let's move on. So assonance versus rhyme scheme. What's the difference between assonance and rhyme scheme? Although rhyme scheme is also the same sounds, in rhyming, those sounds are usually found at the end of the lines. So assonance can be found all throughout the poem, no matter where the line is. Whereas rhyme scheme is at the end, such as, the cat in the hat. So even though those are at the end of the line, that would be more so rhyme scheme. All right, consonants. Close repetition of the same consonant sound preceded by different vowel sounds. So one thing you have to note is at the end of the line of poetry, this produces a half rhyme. So for example, flash and flesh, the sh sound at the end, that would be consonants. Breed and bread, they both end with the D sound, so that would be also an example of consonants. All right, so let's see. It says, find the consonants in our homemade limerick. Sometimes I wish I could wash my reds with my whites, Josh. In a flash they'd be done if I washed them as one, but a pink they would be make as they swish, swash, swish, swash. So kind of straightforward. Wish, wash, Josh, flash, wash, swish, swash, swish, swash. So these are all your consonants. All right. Now, why are these important? So first of all, alliteration, assonance, and consonants are all useful in literature because they create a general flow. They also add a sense of lyricism to a poem or song. They also are used in tongue twisters such as Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Try to say that 5 times. So that kind of concludes our discussion on alliteration, consonants, and assonance. I want you to kind of think about, and in your notes, make sure you have examples from this presentation, and also start to think about what's the significance of alliteration, consonants, and sonnets. Why would an author or writer tend to use those in the poems? Is it just for effect, or is it their writing style? What will be the purpose? And be prepared to discuss that in class when we do our next quest.